What do you do when you want to express yourself confidently, or you want to do something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone, but self-doubt creeps into your mind? How do we express ourselves confidently and authentically when this internal dialogue or this inner critic is constantly telling us that we're not good enough or that we don't have what it takes to succeed? As a singer and voice coach, I can say from personal experience that the thoughts we entertain can have a huge impact on the way in which we use our voices. And certainly self doubt and fear are emotions that can be incredibly crippling. So I want to share a conversation that I had recently with a very successful recording artist and actress whose story about overcoming self-doubt and fear really had an impact on me. I want to share the 4 insights that this conversation has given me about overcoming self-doubt so that you too can also step into your most confident, empowered self, even when things don't go according to plan. All right, so let's dive in. Our ability to influence others is directly impacted by the way we use our voices. After over 16 years coaching some of the world's biggest voices in business, music, TV, and film, I can say with certainty that if you have a voice, then you can learn to use it with confidence and skill. My name is Crystal Diaz. Welcome to the Vocal Branding Podcast. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to have dinner with a very well-known, very successful singer and actress who also happens to train at our vocal studio. And I had so many questions for her, and she very graciously and kindly shared the insights that she's had from her career in the music recording and acting business. And one of the questions I asked her was, do you still get nervous or anxious about performing? Her answer was very interesting. She said, I've been in the industry for 30 years, but it's only recently when I finally know what it feels like to experience that total, in the moment enjoyment of being on stage. And I asked her what she thinks caused this shift. And she told me a story. She said a few years ago, she was performing at a huge concert venue with well over 10,000 people in attendance. And in this performance, there was one important specific choreographed move that served as a cue or a signal for some kind of stage transition. And everyone was relying on her to execute this one move as that cue for the transition, but she forgot. And so there was this moment when the dancers and the musicians were kind of a little startled. And she said that in that split second, she realized 2 things. Number one, she made a mistake. Right? And number two, she realized that it was up to her to decide what would happen next. And so she told herself, I'm always right. These are the words that came into her mind. I'm always right. With that thought, she trusted herself to keep going, and she figured out another way to signal the cue, and with that, everything fell into place. She said that this particular moment actually instigated an important mindset shift in her. She could have reacted to the mistake as soon as she realized it. She could have berated herself. She could have allowed thoughts of self-doubt and, oh no, I messed up, to enter her mind. But she also knew from previous experiences that the minute she allows these thoughts to enter into her mind, it would impact the entirety of her performance. And so after that day, she said she carried these words, I'm always right, as a kind of mantra with her. And so anytime she found herself in these high stakes, very public situations where she has to show up in a certain way, and what she does actually can cause a ripple effect, she always tells herself, I'm always right. Now, we might be thinking, well, that sounds kind of arrogant. That sounds kind of egotistical. I'm always right. But when she explained it to me, I really didn't take it that way at all. In fact, I thought it was pretty brilliant. And so here are 4 insights that this conversation about overcoming self-doubt has given me, and I want to share it with you here in this podcast episode. The first insight I had from this conversation about overcoming self-doubt is we have to be our own biggest cheerleader. When we're performing, or if you're delivering a speech or a presentation, it's really easy to want to look outside of ourselves for validation. We look at the people around us to fuel our confidence, but that's actually an incredibly unreliable source for our self-confidence, especially if that's the only thing our confidence is riding on. So what does it mean to be our own biggest cheerleader? And no, it doesn't mean that we have to be arrogant, or that we have to think we're better than anyone else, or that we're always right and everyone is always wrong. That's not what it means. And so to me, it means 3 things. Number 1, it means having respect for ourselves. If you are a cheerleader for a team or for an individual, for example, then presumably you have respect for that team or that person. And so because of that, you're going to do whatever you can do to support that person that we are a cheerleader for, or that team. And so being our own biggest cheerleader means giving ourselves the support that we need to achieve our goals. So that could mean doing all the right things in terms of preparation work, putting in the rehearsal time, practicing, finding the right coach, building a support team, a network. So essentially, we want to provide ourselves with the support because we respect what it is that we are here to do. Being our own biggest cheerleader also means trusting ourselves to be able to handle whatever comes our way. So cheerleaders for a sports team don't go around telling the athletes all the ways that they're not good enough, right? They're not going to do that. They trust that the athletes are going to be their best selves when it comes to game time, right? So we need to give ourselves that same level of trust as well. And being our own biggest cheerleader also means being well attuned to our own emotional and physical state. I think this is really important because it's important to know how we are feeling and whether what we need is to rally ourselves up or what we need is to rest and reflect and process. Sometimes the best way to support somebody is to give them the space to rest and process when that is what is needed. So that's insight number 1 for how to overcome self-doubt and move into empowered confidence. We have to be our own biggest cheerleader, because at the end of the day, if you're seeking respect and trust from other people, we have to be giving that to ourselves first. The second insight that I had from this conversation about overcoming self-doubt is that our thoughts carry energy. So the artist I spoke to said that when she was on stage, she knew that if she allowed any thought of self-doubt enter her mind, it would ultimately have an impact on everything else that would happen afterwards. It's not that she didn't have self-doubt. It's that she chose not to let it take hold of her, not to let it seep into her thoughts. There's a big difference there. So overcoming self-doubt, it's not about eliminating fear. It's not about eliminating all semblance of self-doubt from our system. It's about choosing the thoughts that we have when those emotions come up. In my coaching sessions with students, I often talk about how the energy that you bring onto a stage or into a performance situation is what determines the outcome. So the energy that you bring into a situation is what determines the outcome. And so you could practice for 10,000 hours. You could do everything you can to execute that perfect performance. But if you bring in negative energy and you let that stay there, it's going to impact the outcome of that performance. So if we can keep this in mind, then we can be a lot more self-aware anytime our thoughts start to take on a negative filter. So we can train ourselves to notice our thoughts. We can train ourselves to become more aware of the thoughts that we entertain. And that act alone can make it easier for us to be a lot more intentional about which thoughts we're going to let stay in our minds and which thoughts we want to reframe. Hey, it's Crystal Diaz here. I hope you are loving the content so far. And hey, if you are ready to turn your voice into your ultimate superpower, to express yourself confidently and authentically, and to inspire those around you with your words or your song, then here are 3 ways that we can work together. Number 1, visit my online shop to check out the vocal exercises and tutorials that I have personally created to help you free up, develop, and strengthen your voice. These are the same exercises that I use for both my speaking clients as well as my singing students. Number 2, join me inside my Singers Connect membership for ongoing live coaching calls and interaction with me and my team. This really is more for singing. Number 3, you can work with me privately through my high-level Resonate voice coaching program. To do any of these things, head over to my website, crystaldiaz.com. That's Crystal with a Krystal. And now, back to your regularly scheduled program. The third insight that I had from this conversation about overcoming self-doubt is that it's not about blindly forging ahead and just thinking to ourselves, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, I'm confident, I can do this, nothing else matters. It's actually about knowing that every single moment that we have presents an opportunity for us to make a choice. Sometimes we only have a split second to make that choice. Maybe you make a mistake on a song or a presentation, self-doubt comes in, you feel anxious, you feel fear. But then you make a choice and you keep going. And yes, sometimes you need a mantra like, I'm always right, to help you make that choice with confidence. Sometimes we need that. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we don't reflect on our choices afterwards. Of course we do. And that's actually what the artist that I spoke to talked about as well. In that moment when she's on stage and she's got 10,000 sets of eyeballs on her, she has to think, I'm always right. And she has to go for what she believes is the right thing to do. Because if she doesn't, she knows that self-doubt is going to creep in. And that can be a lot more crippling, not just for her, but for her crew who are actually relying on her. Afterwards, though, she made her amends, she acknowledged her mistakes. But when the stakes are high and you only have that one split second to decide what to do next, you go for whatever gives you the highest vibrational energy, even if it means telling yourself, I'm right. In that moment, you go for that choice, right? You go for that choice that you believe in that moment is for the highest good. Are you always going to be right? Probably not. And there is a time and place to reflect on that and make amends afterwards. I think what so often happens is that we question ourselves so much that even when we do make a choice, we're second guessing ourselves. And then we go into this back and forth shuffling state of, wait, do I do it? Do I not? What should I do? What's the right action? And that just invites more hesitation and self-doubt. But if we know that, hey, there's a time and place to reflect on this and make amends if necessary later on, but right now we need to make a choice and keep going. If we know that, then we're less likely to be held back by more thoughts of self-doubt and just second guessing all around. The fourth insight that I had from this conversation about overcoming self-doubt is that the only thing we can really control is ourselves. That's it. And we have to accept that things might not pan out exactly the way you want them to, even if you've done everything in your power to try to control the outcome. Even if you've done all the work, you've done your practices, you've rehearsed your head off. Yes, you're giving yourself a higher chance of success, of course, but there's no guarantee. You can still get up on stage and mess up royally. But if we accept in advance that mistakes could happen and we make our peace with that, then we can lessen the chances of us becoming crippled by the fear of possibly making mistakes or the fear of possibly failing. And what I took from this conversation that I had with the artist is that she became aware of her own thoughts and actions, and she was able to make a choice and feel really good about that choice, even knowing she had messed up. So even knowing she had messed up, she gave herself that permission to make a choice, and she stuck by it, and she felt good about it. That seemingly simple act actually enabled her to let go of the fear of failing or the fear of making mistakes. And ever since then, she was able to actually fully embrace and open up to that joy of being in the present moment and just fully embracing that and enjoying that moment. And as a result, it meant that she became a better better performer. She could connect more authentically with her audiences and with her crew members. And ultimately, isn't this the goal, right? It's not about the accolades, the awards, the recognition, the validation, the money. Of course, all of those things are good. But she had all of those things. She had all of those things, and she still doubted herself. She still wasn't able to fully enjoy being in the moment. It actually took a mindset shift for her to get there. I think that what I'm saying here in this video are things that we've probably heard before. They are things that we know intellectually, but there's a really big difference between knowing and embodying, right? So yes, we know that anything could happen. Yes, we know that we might mess up, that we might embarrass ourselves. But knowing that doesn't actually stop us from trying our hardest to be in control of everything, right? But you see, the thing is, once we are in that mode of trying to be in control all the time, that's actually when we are most susceptible to self-doubt, to fear. So in this way, I think that we can actually use our feelings of self-doubt as an awareness tool. So when we start to experience fear or self-doubt or stage fright or anxiety, lack of confidence, we can actually say to ourselves, maybe I'm feeling this way because I'm trying too hard to control the situation. Maybe I'm gripping too tightly to that sense of control. And so when we realize that, we have a choice. We could say to ourselves, I don't care. I want to be in full control. I want to hold on as tight as possible, which ultimately we know is not actually possible to be in 100% control at 100% of the time. Or maybe we can take a step back. Maybe we can take a breath, let loose a little, be a little okay with some imperfection. Now, I don't say that lightly because as vocal performers, we are notorious for being perfectionists. And perfectionists are that way because deep down we are plagued with self-doubt and fears of unworthiness. And at least that has been my own personal experience. But what I've learned is that there's a big difference between being fueled by fear or being propelled forward from a place of empowered confidence. So we're either fueled by fear or we can be propelled forward from a place of empowered confidence. Fear carries a certain type of energy. Empowered confidence carries a completely different feeling to it, a completely different type of energy. Fear doesn't allow us to step into our best, most authentic selves because we're constantly on the lookout for potential danger, right? We're constantly micromanaging ourselves in our every action. Empowerment, though, empowered confidence allows us to open up. It allows us to operate from a state of trust and acceptance. And it's in this more open, trusting state when we are far more willing to allow our true selves to come through, to embrace the present moment, to connect more deeply and authentically with those around us, and to do so in a higher vibrational way. So those are the 4 insights that I had from this conversation about overcoming self-doubt. Number 1 is we have to be our own biggest cheerleader in every circumstance. And we do that by respecting ourselves, giving ourselves that respect, by trusting ourselves, and also knowing when we need to rally up and when we need to rest and process. And that comes from a lot of self-awareness and just self-knowing. Secondly, it's that our thoughts carry energy. And so it's not about trying to eliminate fear or trying to never feel self-doubt. It's about knowing that when those emotions come up, we still have a choice for how we choose to think about those feelings. We have a choice about what thoughts we choose to entertain and what thoughts we want to reframe. And that's very important because the thoughts that we have will carry energy, and that energy is going to impact how you show up. The third insight is that every moment presents us with an opportunity to make a choice. And sometimes we only have a split second to make that choice. And so sometimes we need to have mantras to help us, to help fuel our confidence so that we can make that choice according to what we feel is best in that moment. And it's important to recognize that there is a time and place to reflect on our actions later on so that we are not caught up in second guessing ourselves. The fourth insight is that realization, or the reminder that really the only thing we have control over is ourselves and our choices and our actions, and that we could prepare ourselves as much as we can, but things are going to happen that are beyond our control. And actually, there's a lot of power that comes from that acceptance, of that willingness to accept the unpredictable. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please hit the subscribe button, leave me a comment, and do check out some of the other episodes that I have on here. I have song tutorials and other episodes of my podcast as well, all about finding your voice. And hey, if you're interested in taking a step further, you can check out the various ways that you and I can work together in the description where you're watching this video, or in the show notes if you are listening to this as a podcast. Until next time.